let's kick off hour number 2 as promised by going to our guest line and bringing on our first guest today. He's the color analyst for the Cardinal Radio Network, on to fill us in on tomorrow's opponent, the Stanford Cardinal, as we welcome on John Platz. John, thanks so much for the time. How are you today?
Afternoon, Stephen, Paulie. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so I guess bring us up to date on the expectations with this team. We know that much like Syracuse, Stanford has had a few rough years of late, and they bring in a new head coach in Troy Taylor. Goes 3-9 in year one. It seems like the expectation, at least from afar, looks like they should be a little bit better here in year two. What are you expecting with Stanford this season?
Well, certainly that's the hope after 3-9 years for Stanford, the glorious decade of the 2010s. But I think it's also a bit of an unknown, right? I mean, we boarded the plane yesterday at 1 o'clock to go to a conference game, so it's a whole new world for those of us on the West Coast during the ACC. Although that said, we're thrilled to be here, to be playing sort of like-minded schools with big names out west. And but I think there's as much I don't know as there is sort of the usual September optimism. So I think we're learning about this team. We, meaning Stanford fans, Trey Clarity and myself on the broadcast team, as you all. But it's going to be a great matchup. It's going to be fun. My first time in the GMA Wireless Dome. I like the tune you guys were playing coming in, the Chic, because I'm class of 79, and I remember watching Syracuse and Leo Routens, and then it just went up from there to Pearl Washington. So it's fun for us older folks to be here at Syracuse to have a conference game.
Yeah, you guys came out a day early. Can you speak to that? What the thinking was with Coach Taylor and the team deciding to come out? And I know it's obviously a very long flight. Was that the main thinking? Was it's a long flight? Let's get there, make sure that our legs are under us before we go play a football game?
Yeah, this is pretty standard stuff. When Stanford's got a long trip, and for example, when we play Hawaii, going 5 hours the other way, it's 2 days. So unless the players get their legs, after a 5-hour flight, you get stiff. Playing the next day, would be tough. So Stanford's future trips in the conference, we go to Clemson next week, and then Notre Dame in a couple weeks, or 3 weeks, I guess it is. It's standard on the long trips to go a couple days early.
You mentioned, John, that you're still kind of getting to know this team, and I watched a lot of that TCU game. What did you take from that? Because it was a close game. It also felt like TCU kind of helped out Stanford in some ways to keep that game close. But do you take more positives or more negatives away from that opening loss to TCU?
I take positives. I think TCU, hard to sort of figure out what their win total will be, but they're going to be competitive in those games. They, under Sonny Dykes, they have a real advanced passing game, and that's where Stanford struggled in that one. I take it as a positive. For Stanford, it's a lot depends on the quarterback now. Newsflash, quarterback's important. But on this Stanford team, where the running backs are, skew very young, the main running backs probably are going to end up being true freshmen. Ashton Daniels, who's the starter, is a real good runner, and his running, is going to be as important as his passing. And just kind of watching him mix that and how proficient he is at both. I think if you were to ask me the biggest variable and most important thing, it would be the Stanford pass game, because that's where Stanford is going to be able to keep up with teams if the defense is not up to par in certain games. And Daniels, as a passer, is evolving. And now Alec Iomanner on the outside, whereas number 13, he's elite. And if their rhythm can be struck between the quarterback Ashton Daniels and Iomanner, that certainly would help Stanford. Iomanner is the kid who had 294 yards, 13 catches in that win at Colorado on a Friday night almost a year ago. So the Stanford pass game and the Stanford quarterback in the pass game, I think, is the most important variable, and I think the jury's out as far as how good that's going to be.
We saw TCU have a lot of success through the air in that opener, and that's something that, Syracuse has certainly had a lot of success throwing the ball this year as well with Kyle McCord. I'm sure that you've at least seen highlights of Syracuse this year, and as you prepare for this game, what stands out to you about the Orange, and I guess the SU offense in particular, led by the Ohio State transfer Kyle McCord?
I've been so impressed, guys. So I've watched full tape of both games. Actually, I watched them live. That's how interested I was in watching Syracuse. I mean, Kyle McCord, 8 touchdowns and 1 interception,
yeah.
But the rhythm, all kinds of throws. Trevor Pena's got 4 catches. So he's sort of your Z guy or your quick receiver. But the tight end Gadsden is a big target. And, the numbers for McCord last year speak to his proficiency. And I just think he's teed up for an enormous year. It's, one thing I've learned, and fellas, you may have known this from last year, Stanford not being in the conference last year, the quarterback play in this league is really good.
Yeah.
And McCord is likely the best of the bunch.
It's funny. Our previous head coach here, Dino Babers, used to use Stanford as an example. We used to say, what is realistic here at Syracuse? And he would point to Stanford. He said, we want to be the Stanford of the East, a program that wins, 8, 9, 10 games year in and year out and goes to bowl games year in and year out and, graduates our players. And, basically everything Stanford has and does, we want to do that here at Syracuse. And then, kind of ever since he said that, both programs, had some struggles. And, with Stanford, it's been a lot of, 4-8 and 3-9, as you mentioned. And, Syracuse has been kind of stuck in that, 6-6 range for several years. What will it take for Stanford? And do you see a day, I guess, John, where Stanford can get back to, going to bowl games year in and year out, and that is just kind of the expectation? And what will it take to get there?
Well, I do think it's possible. Stanford, again, you guys were witness to last decade, right, with McCaffrey and Andrew Luck and 3 Rose Bowls in 4 years and all of that. And then about the last 4 years or so, it's fallen off. Well, part of that coincides with NIL and Stanford trying to sort of figure out where it fits in the NIL ecosystem. I think Stanford's approach is, look, we're never going to be able to play in the big leagues of NIL, so we're going to continue to offer a world-class education. We're going to develop you for 4 years. We're not going to be in the portal in, portal out game. It's not to say Stanford doesn't have transfers. They got 2 or 3, which I know is stunning for a lot of listeners, but that's what it is. So the transfers sort of complement a core, and so Stanford has to be good finding the guys that fit the Stanford program, i.e. can get in school, and then invest in them and hope that turns out well. Troy Taylor, the other piece of this, guys, is Troy Taylor is really creative with the offense. He's a little Bill Walsh-like for those of us that go back 4 decades or so. I think he's waiting for the current players or ones that he might bring in to sort of be able to execute the sort of creative schemes he has. You'll see it in the pass game tomorrow. I mean, the pass game uses the width of the field, uses the backs, and so going back to John Elway when Stanford's defenses maybe weren't quite up to stuff, but we'll score 35 and we'll beat Ohio State and Columbus, which Stanford did in 1982 when Elway was a senior, or beat 4th-ranked Oklahoma in 1980 when Elway was a sophomore. Not to say he was the only reason, but sort of a robust pass game and a robust sort of play caller in Troy Taylor. I think that's the ticket for Stanford to get back. And I think for Stanford to do well tomorrow, you're going to have to see a lot of offense, because I expect the Syracuse offense to be real productive. For Stanford, it may be a boat race kind of deal.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. You brought up Ashton Daniels earlier, Stanford's quarterback. You well know this, that Justin Lamson was on the roster here for 2 years, didn't play in any games, was part of the spring game here, and fans were excited about the performance he put up in the spring game, got hurt, and then never played a single snap here. Can you talk about his role, I guess, with Stanford? We saw him throw a touchdown pass in the TCU game. It seems like he gets, a little bit of run here and there, but what is Justin Lamson's role with this Stanford team?
Well, again, it's part and parcel of the Troy Taylor creativity. Taylor is not wedded to QB1, and that's the only guy who's going to play. Lamson typically comes in with an emphasis on the run game. Now, Stanford will mix it up, and like you say, it was a 4th and 2 in the game against TCU, and that, the whole prior film of last year was that, Lamson's going to take this direct snap and run it in. Well, Stanford mixed it up, and he threw it to Ismail Sissi for the touchdown. So, in Stanford's scheme, Lamson tends to be a runner, but he's rounding out the pass game, and I think he's put enough on tape here that when he comes in, you can't totally think, okay, it's guaranteed to be a run. So, running quarterback, enthusiastic guy. He's very excited, he tells us, to be coming here tomorrow. He's got a lot of friends still on the Syracuse team. He called out Derek McDonald, I believe the young man's name is.
Yep.
Someone he was close to. he'll be one of the three captains tomorrow at midfield for the coin toss.
Yeah, what a cool opportunity for him to be back in the Dome. And I actually heard the soundbite where he was talking about the fact that he personally knows 7 of the 11 starters on defense for Syracuse. And so what a cool opportunity for him to come back. I guess last question for you, John, as you look at this game tomorrow, kind of lay it out for us. What are you expecting to see? What are kind of the keys for Stanford to pull off this win tomorrow inside the Dome?
Well, a couple. As I said a little earlier, I think Stanford is going to have to keep up with Syracuse. I don't see the Syracuse offense sputtering, and that's not to say that Stanford's not going to try and cook up something in the way of disruption. I mean, if you can get Kyle McCord off rhythm somehow, that certainly would lower the Syracuse number, whatever it's going to be. But Stanford is going to have to, have that pass game going and be capable of, putting up 3, 4, 5 touchdowns in addition to whatever field goals they can muster. I see a high-scoring game. I think if Stanford can be, have a crooked number to the advantage in turnovers, that would help. I don't see McCord with those receivers, the Georgia transfers that are in, the tight end with Pena. It's hard to see that rhythm being upended, and so Stanford's going to, I think, have to keep up. And if they get a turnover or two, maybe they can end up on the high side. I expect a high-scoring game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Should be a fun one. 7:30 kick inside the Dome tomorrow night between Syracuse and Stanford. John, thanks so much for the time. Enjoy your time in the 315.
Fellas, thanks for having me on. I look forward to tomorrow night as well.
All right, color analyst for the Cardinal Radio Network, John Platts, joining us here on the